The sun hung low over the dusty streets of Willow Creek, casting a golden glow that made the wooden storefronts shimmer like firelight. The town, usually quiet and sleepy, was buzzing with excitement. It was the day of the annual Willow Creek Fair, an event that brought together every resident for laughter, food, and friendly competition. Children ran through the streets, trailing ribbons and laughter, while merchants called out from their stalls, vying for the attention of passers-by. The air smelled of fresh bread, fried pies, and the faint tang of horses in the nearby stables. At the center of the square stood the sheriff, a tall, broad-shouldered man with graying hair at his temples and kind, weathered eyes that had seen too much for a man his age. Sheriff Nathaniel Harper, widowed for nearly 3 years, had become a quiet, dependable figure in the town. People respected him for his fairness and strength, though most whispered about the loneliness he carried behind his stoic exterior. Today, however, Nathaniel had decided to loosen the strictness that usually kept his emotions in check. He climbed onto the wooden platform built for the fair's announcements and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen of Willow Creek," he began, his voice deep and steady, carrying over the hum of conversation. Heads turned, and a hush fell over the crowd. "I've got a bit of fun for you today. Now you all know I've been a bachelor of sorts for, well, longer than I care to admit. And I've been told it is high time I consider finding someone to share my life with." A few chuckles rippled through the audience, and Nathaniel smiled faintly. "So today, I declare choose any woman you want." The crowd erupted into whispers and laughter. Some women blushed and looked away, while others elbowed each other in playful disbelief. Nathaniel's words were meant lightly, but beneath the humor was a quiet truth. He longed for companionship, someone to stand beside him not just in the town square, but in the silent, lonely moments of life. Among the spectators, children played near the fountain, their laughter mingling with the merchant calls. Nathaniel's twin daughters, Lily and Rose, perched near the platform, their small hands gripping the railing. At 8 years old, they were clever and unusually perceptive for their age. They had inherited their mother's bright eyes and sharp instincts, and they watched their father with an intensity that sometimes unnerved adults. Today, they sensed something different in their father's expression, not just jest, but a vulnerability he rarely showed. Across the square, townspeople began nudging each other, trying to figure out which women Nathaniel might truly notice. It was clear that this announcement, though playful on the surface, stirred more than curiosity. It brought excitement, speculation, and the faint undercurrent of hope. But Nathaniel himself was distracted, scanning the crowd not for applause or admiration, but for a presence he didn't yet recognize, a quiet figure standing apart from the bustling fair, observing rather than participating. There was something about her poise, the way she held herself with restrained dignity, that made him pause. As the laughter and chatter continued around him, Nathaniel felt a stirring of anticipation, tinged with fear. Was it possible to open his heart again, to invite someone new into the fragile world he had built after loss? Little did he know, the woman who would soon enter his life had already noticed him, her own story of pain and resilience hidden behind cautious eyes. Their paths were about to cross, not with ceremony or fanfare, but in a moment that would change the course of their lives and the lives of his twin daughters forever. For now the sheriff stood on the platform, a figure of strength wrapped in a quiet longing, unaware that the fair's innocent challenge would mark the beginning of a story no one in Willow Creek could have predicted. The dusty road into Willow Creek seemed endless, stretching under the blazing midday sun, flanked by dry grasses that whispered in the wind. A lone rider approached, a woman on a weary horse, her silhouette small but determined against the horizon. She rode with quiet purpose, avoiding the chatter of the town in the distance as if she wished to arrive unnoticed. Her name was Clara, though no one in Willow Creek knew it yet. Behind her eyes lingered shadows of loss and hardship, remnants of a life that had demanded more courage than most ever faced. Clara dismounted near the edge of town, brushing dust from her worn cloak. She adjusted the wide brim of her hat to shield her face from the sun, careful not to draw attention. Her horse, sturdy but tired, snorted softly, sensing her unease. She had traveled far, seeking a place to rest, to hide, and perhaps, if luck allowed, to start over. The town seemed lively from afar, its festival filling the streets with laughter and music, but Clara's instincts told her to remain at the periphery. Crowds and noise were dangerous, unpredictable, and she preferred solitude. As she made her way toward the outskirts of the fair, her gaze swept over the bustling square. Children darted between vendors, tugging at ribbons and candy sticks, while townsfolk bartered and laughed, unaware of the stranger among them. Clara's eyes, sharp and observant, took in every detail: the wooden stalls, the scent of freshly baked bread, the shimmer of sunlight on the fountain. But she remained a shadow, a quiet presence that seemed part of the scenery yet apart from it. It was then that she noticed the sheriff, standing on a raised platform, addressing the crowd with a mix of humor and solemnity. His broad shoulders, weathered hands, and kind eyes marked him as someone who carried responsibility heavily yet with dignity. Clara's attention lingered, not because of vanity or curiosity, but because there was a sense of something familiar in his posture, something that spoke to strength tempered by kindness. In that instant, she felt the faint pull of connection, even though she knew better than to trust strangers. She paused behind a cart of fresh vegetables, taking care to blend into the crowd. A smile flickered across her lips, almost imperceptible, as she watched the sheriff interact with the townspeople. Children approached him fearlessly, tugging at his coat, and the twin daughters, though she couldn't yet know them, stood close, their eyes bright and mischievous. Clara felt a pang of longing, the quiet ache of someone who had once dreamed of family and safety, but had been denied both. Despite her desire to remain unnoticed, she couldn't help but feel the pull of the town's energy, the warmth and simplicity of life that she had been deprived of for so long. She knew she had to be cautious. Her past was not idle, and the shadows of her previous life could reach her even here. Yet, for the first time in years, Clara felt a tiny flicker of hope. Perhaps this town, with its dusty streets and cheerful chaos, could be the place where she could finally breathe, even if only for a while. Her arrival did not go completely unseen. A few curious eyes tracked her movement, noting her quiet grace and the air of mystery that clung to her. The sheriff, instinctively protective and ever observant, finally turned in her direction. Their eyes met briefly across the square, a fleeting connection charged with unspoken recognition. Neither spoke, but in that glance something unacknowledged shifted, a spark of intrigue, the beginning of a bond that would ripple through the lives of the town, the sheriff and his twin daughters. Clara stepped back into the shadows, letting the crowd obscure her presence once more. She would wait, watch, and only reveal herself when she was ready. For now, Willow Creek was just a town on the horizon, a place of possibility, danger, and perhaps in time, the promise of belonging. The morning after the fair, Willow Creek was quieter, the excitement of the festival replaced by the gentle rhythm of everyday life. The streets were filled with merchants reopening their stalls, children chasing one another along the wooden sidewalks, and townsfolk tending to chores that had been put aside for the festivities. Clara had spent the night at the edge of town, in a modest room above a stable she had found through quiet inquiry. She had remained largely invisible, avoiding contact, her presence known only to a few observant townspeople who had glimpsed her arrival the previous day. Sheriff Nathaniel Harper rode through the town square on his horse, inspecting the streets and greeting townsfolk with a nod or brief word. His mind, however, was preoccupied. He kept thinking about the mysterious woman he had seen at the fair. There was something about her, a quiet strength, a calm intelligence that lingered in his thoughts. He had watched her without intending to, noticing the way she held herself, always observant but never intrusive, always careful but never fearful. There was a story in her eyes, he was sure, one he couldn't yet read but desperately wanted to understand. The first encounter happened by chance, though fate had a way of making chance feel inevitable. A small boy, no older than 6, had wandered too far from his mother, lost in the maze of stalls and bustling townsfolk. He cried softly, clutching a ragged toy horse in one hand. Clara, walking nearby to fetch supplies, noticed the child immediately. Despite her cautious nature, she stepped forward, her voice gentle and steady. "Hey there, little one. Are you lost?" The boy's eyes widened in surprise, but he nodded, his sobs quieting under the warmth in her tone. Nathaniel, patrolling the same street, saw the interaction from a distance. His protective instincts flared. He dismounted swiftly, his boots hitting the wooden planks with purpose. As he approached, he noticed Clara kneeling to the boy's level, her hat shading her face, but her presence undeniably calm and reassuring. The sheriff observed silently for a moment, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Here was someone who instinctively acted with care, yet did not seek recognition or reward, a quality rare and admirable in Willow Creek. "Is everything all right here?" Nathaniel asked, his voice firm but kind. The boy looked up at him, clutching Clara's hand. I lost Mama," he admitted, his voice trembling. Clara smiled reassuringly, speaking first this time. "Don't worry. I'll help you find her." Nathaniel studied her face, noting the steadiness in her eyes, the way she crouched to the child's level with patience. There was no hesitation, no fear, only a quiet determination to help. Together, the three walked through the town square, Nathaniel subtly guiding the way while Clara kept the boy's spirits lifted with small jokes and gentle questions. Their teamwork was seamless, though unspoken, a natural rhythm that drew the sheriff's admiration. When they finally reunited the boy with his mother, the mother's gratitude spilled over in words and gestures. But the sheriff's gaze lingered on Clara. She stepped back politely, nodding, as if to say she was only doing what anyone should. Yet the sheriff felt a spark of connection that was undeniable. "Thank you," Nathaniel said quietly, once the boy was safe. Clara met his gaze, her eyes holding his for the briefest moment, a mixture of caution and curiosity. "Just helping where I can," she replied softly. No grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, just honesty wrapped in gentleness. And yet, for Nathaniel, that was enough to begin a story he had not expected to start, a story that would intertwine their lives with laughter, love, and the unpredictable chaos of family. As Clara walked away, Nathaniel's thoughts lingered on her, and though he didn't yet know her name, he felt certain of one thing. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, and she had just stepped into a world she might come to call home. Sheriff Nathaniel Harper returned home that evening, the warm glow of sunset spilling through the windows of his modest house at the edge of Willow Creek. The twins, Lily and Rose, were already there, their small bodies darting through the living room as they played a game of make-believe involving bandits, horses, and the heroic sheriff. Their laughter echoed through the house, a lively soundtrack to a world that Nathaniel had long feared was too quiet after the loss of their mother. The girls paused when their father entered, eyes wide and curious. "Papa, did you see the festival today?" Lily asked, her dark curls bouncing as she twirled in place. Rose, equally spirited, bounced on the balls of her feet. "Did anyone choose a princess yet?" she chimed in, giggling. Nathaniel chuckled, ruffling their hair as he sat in the chair by the fire. He had always admired their energy and wit, even as he struggled to keep up with it. But today, his mind wasn't on the game or the festival, it lingered on the woman who had captured his attention earlier. He tried to explain nothing, to let the evening proceed like any other, yet the twins sensed his distraction immediately. Children, he knew, could read emotions with astonishing clarity. "Papa, you're thinking about someone," Lily said, tilting her head knowingly. Nathaniel froze for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Maybe," he admitted carefully. "But it's nothing important." The twins exchanged a glance, understanding far more than Nathaniel intended. Lily, always the bolder of the two, asked, "Papa, was it the lady at the festival? The one helping the little boy?" Nathaniel's breath caught slightly. "Perhaps," he said cautiously, not wanting to reveal too much. Rose clutched Lily's hand, her eyes wide. "She seemed nice. Papa, do you like her?" Nathaniel hesitated, caught off guard by the innocence and insight of his daughters. He realized in that moment that their opinions mattered to him more than he had admitted. After all, they were the legacy of his late wife, the heart of the family, and their happiness was intertwined with his own. "I think she might be someone special," he confessed, his voice quiet but earnest. The twins beamed, their faces lighting up with mischief and excitement. From that night forward, Lily and Rose took it upon themselves to observe Clara whenever she appeared in town. They watched from the edges of the square, pretending to chase butterflies or examine flowers, while their eyes followed her every movement. They noted her kindness, the gentle way she interacted with townsfolk, and how effortlessly she handled herself in situations that might have flustered others. Slowly a plan began to form in their imaginative little minds. They would test this woman, see if she could be part of their family, and most importantly, make sure she could love them as much as they hoped she could love their father. Over the next few days, the twins found small ways to interact with Clara. Lily might accidentally drop a scarf near her, while Rose would ask questions about the fair or offer her a piece of pie. Clara, cautious yet patient, accepted these gestures, slowly opening a window into her guarded heart. She hadn't expected children to be so perceptive, so clever, or so warm, and she felt herself drawn to their energy despite her better judgment. Nathaniel watched these interactions with quiet gratitude and a flicker of hope. He saw how the twins' playful attention and subtle approval had a profound effect on Clara, softening the edges of her wariness. In their small, unspoken way, Lily and Rose were acting as guardians of his heart, ensuring that the woman he was beginning to care for was truly someone who could belong in their lives. By the end of the week, it was clear. The twins had made their choice, and in doing so, they were nudging the sheriff's heart toward a path he had long feared to tread. The Willow Creek Fair had shifted from casual celebration to a full day of competitions, games, and challenges designed to entertain the townsfolk and show off the skills of its residents. This year, the town council had added a playful contest of character, a series of small tasks and riddles meant to test patience, courage, and wit. The sheriff had laughed when he heard of it, joking that no one could possibly challenge him. But Clara, moving quietly through the crowds, caught his eye. At first, Clara had no intention of participating. She had come to Willow Creek seeking safety and quiet, not attention. But as she observed the townspeople laughing and working together, a spark of curiosity and perhaps a desire to belong pushed her forward. A friendly hand from one of the organizers invited her to join, and despite her hesitation, she agreed. Her first task was simple: retrieve a flag from the top of a makeshift pole, testing balance and agility. The townsfolk watched with amusement as Clara stepped forward with quiet determination, her movements precise, her confidence understated yet undeniable. The next challenge tested cleverness. Participants were given riddles to solve, each one more complicated than the last. Clara approached each with calm thoughtfulness, listening carefully before answering. She didn't rush, and her solutions were met with impressed murmurs from the crowd. Nathaniel watched from a distance, admiration in his eyes. Her cleverness was matched only by her humility. She never sought praise, never flaunted her skill. Even the most skeptical townspeople began to nod in recognition, realizing that this stranger was remarkable in a way that couldn't be ignored. The final challenge of the day was a test of courage. A small stage scenario had been set up, a rescue of a frightened goat trapped on a narrow ledge near the creek. Clara approached with careful steps, assessing the situation and speaking softly to the animal to calm it. Nathaniel felt a swell of pride as he watched her remain composed under pressure, moving deliberately to guide the goat to safety without a hint of panic. The twin girls, Lily and Rose, who had been watching from the sidelines, clapped and cheered. In their minds, this confirmed what they already suspected. Clara was strong, kind, and brave, everything they wanted for their father. By the end of the contest, Clara was quietly celebrated by the townspeople, though she remained modest and unassuming. Nathaniel approached her, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You handled that impressively," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Clara shrugged slightly, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I just did what felt right," she replied softly. The twins ran up, their eyes sparkling. "Papa, did you see her?" Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. Rose nodded vigorously. "She's amazing, and maybe she's the one." Nathaniel chuckled, a warmth spreading through him. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for her courage, but for the way she fit seamlessly into the rhythm of their lives, even in such a short time. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fairgrounds, Clara found herself surrounded by people who had begun to accept her, though they did not yet know her full story. Nathaniel stayed close, offering small gestures of support, while the twins flitted around her, making jokes and trying to include her in their games. For the first time in years, Clara felt a tentative sense of belonging, a spark of hope that perhaps she could stay, perhaps she could finally call this place home. It was a small but significant turning point. The town had tested her, and she had passed not through bravado or showmanship, but through patience, courage, and kindness. And Nathaniel, watching from nearby, realized that she had not only impressed the town, but had begun to capture his heart in ways he could no longer ignore. In the days following the fair, Willow Creek settled back into its familiar rhythm. But for Sheriff Nathaniel Harper and Clara, the pace of life had subtly shifted. Their encounters, once casual and fleeting, began to stretch into moments of genuine conversation and shared laughter. It started with small gestures, Nathaniel offering to escort her to the general store, Clara accepting with a quiet smile. A borrowed cup of sugar that turned into an hour-long chat over the kitchen counter of the sheriff's office. Each meeting felt deliberate yet unspoken, a careful weaving of two lives into proximity. Clara remained cautious. She had spent so long avoiding attachments, hiding from a past that had taught her trust could be dangerous. Yet Nathaniel's presence was different. There was no demand for explanation, no pressing need to reveal herself too quickly. He offered kindness without expectation, attention without intrusion. This balance, rare and disarming, drew her in slowly, like the sun inching over the horizon after a long winter. Their conversations often meandered through mundane topics, yet beneath the surface, a deeper understanding grew. Nathaniel spoke of the town, of his duties as sheriff, and occasionally, in quiet, measured moments, of his late wife. He shared memories, tinged with sorrow and warmth, allowing Clara glimpses of a man shaped by love and loss. Clara, in turn, revealed fragments of her own story carefully chosen, enough to show resilience without exposing vulnerability too soon. Nathaniel listened without judgment, offering gentle reassurance, his empathy evident in the tilt of his head and the steady gaze that seemed to say, "I understand, and I am here." The twins, Lily and Rose, played an unexpected but pivotal role in their budding bond. Children, as Nathaniel often reminded himself, had a way of seeing the truth behind facades. The girls observed Clara's interactions, occasionally testing her patience with playful pranks, a harmless tug on her coat, an unexpected tickle, a dramatic rescue request for an imaginary kitten. Clara, with a mixture of amusement and patience, navigated these tests effortlessly, never losing her composure or kindness. The twins' approval was clear, and Nathaniel noticed how his daughter's warmth toward Clara softened her guarded demeanor. One afternoon, the sheriff invited Clara to join him and the twins on a short ride across the outskirts of town. The wind swept across the open plains, and the sky stretched wide and endless above them. Lily and Rose laughed freely, chasing each other around the horses, while Clara, seated carefully behind Nathaniel, felt a rare sense of ease. For the first time in years, she was not running, not hiding. She was present, part of a small but tangible community. Nathaniel's steady presence behind her, hands lightly holding the reins, offered a reassurance that went beyond words. Evenings often ended with shared dinners at the sheriff's home. The girls would chatter about their day, Clara listening and occasionally laughing at their antics, her smile slow and genuine. Nathaniel observed quietly, his heart swelling with a mixture of affection and hope. He saw how naturally Clara fit into their lives, how her kindness and patience nurtured the family unit he had worked so hard to protect. Gradually, an unspoken trust emerged. Clara began to rely on Nathaniel in small ways, sharing her thoughts, asking questions, and seeking his counsel. Nathaniel, in turn, found himself opening his heart in ways he hadn't allowed since his wife's passing. The silent acknowledgement of mutual care became a steady undercurrent in their interactions, a promise that, should they both choose it, their lives could intertwine in a bond stronger than either had dared hope for. By the end of the week, the sheriff, the twins, and Clara had established a rhythm of companionship that felt effortless yet profound. There were no dramatic confessions or declarations, only the slow, steady accumulation of trust, laughter, and shared moments. In these quiet, ordinary experiences, the foundation of a new family was being laid, brick by brick, heart by heart, ready to withstand the challenges that life and the past might still present. Willow Creek had always been a quiet town, where the horizon stretched wide and life moved at a steady pace, but peace was never guaranteed. Clara had begun to feel, for the first time in years, that she could belong. Her cautious optimism was tempered by the reality of the past she had tried to escape, a past that, unbeknownst to her, had not let go so easily. It began subtly. Strange glances from outsiders in the saloon, unfamiliar horse tracks near the outskirts of town, and the feeling of being watched. Clara dismissed them at first, convincing herself that paranoia was a habit she could no longer afford. But one late afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets, the threat became undeniable. A man rode into town, his presence commanding and dangerous, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. He was a remnant of her previous life, someone who had been searching for her, someone who could unravel the fragile sense of safety she had built. Clara froze, her instinct to flee clashing with the knowledge that the town and Nathaniel could not be abandoned. She knew that running might protect her in the moment, but it would also leave the sheriff and the twins vulnerable to the chaos he had hoped to leave behind. Her fear was tempered by a growing resolve. She would face the danger, but she would not face it alone. Nathaniel, noticing her unease, approached her with measured calm. "Clara," he said quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Something's wrong. You don't have to face it alone." His voice was steady, carrying the weight of authority and the promise of protection. Clara's eyes met his, and in that silent exchange, she realized she had trusted him more deeply than she had allowed herself to trust anyone in years. The confrontation came quickly. The man from her past sought to intimidate, but Nathaniel stood firm, blocking the path with quiet authority. "She's under my protection now," he declared, his hand resting on the grip of his revolver, Though his voice conveyed more than just readiness, it carried the unwavering certainty that he would not let harm touch those in his care. The man sneered, attempting to assert control, but Nathaniel's presence, combined with the watchful eyes of the townspeople, forced him to reconsider. Clara watched, a mixture of fear and awe, as Nathaniel moved seamlessly between caution and courage. His protective instincts were not fueled by anger alone, but by a profound care that made him willing to put himself at risk. She felt a surge of gratitude and something like hope, fragile yet undeniable. She realized that the sheriff was not only a figure of authority, but also a partner she could rely on in a way she had never imagined. The twins, sensing the tension, hid behind a nearby cart, peeking with wide eyes. Though they were young, they understood enough to know that their father's courage had saved them all from danger. Lily and Rose exchanged a knowing glance, silently affirming their trust in Clara. If their father could protect her, and she could endure this threat, then perhaps she truly belonged in their family. By evening, the man had been escorted out of town by the combined efforts of Nathaniel and a few trusted townsfolk. Clara's fear slowly ebbed, replaced by a cautious sense of relief. She turned to Nathaniel, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you for standing with me." Nathaniel's gaze softened, the weight of the day lifting slightly as he replied, "You don't have to face anything alone, not anymore." That night, as Clara settled into the small room above the sheriff's stable, she felt the truth of the day sink in. For the first time, she realized that life in Willow Creek was not just a refuge. It was a place where she could belong, where she could trust, and where she could allow herself to hope. Nathaniel had not only defended her physically, but had offered her the promise of something far more profound: safety, acceptance, and the beginnings of love. The evening air in Willow Creek was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the faint smoke of nearby hearths. The town had settled into its quiet rhythm after the day's excitement and the unsettling arrival of Clara as past adversary. But inside Sheriff Nathaniel Harper's modest home, the atmosphere was charged with a different kind of tension, the kind that comes when hearts have long held unspoken truths, and the moment finally arrives to release them. Nathaniel sat in his chair near the fireplace, the twins playing quietly with wooden toys on the floor. Clara, seated across from him, looked almost unrecognizable in the warm glow of lamplight. The events of the day had left her exhausted, but also deeply aware of the growing bond between them. Her guard, always high, had softened in ways she didn't fully understand. She had spent years protecting herself, keeping the world at a distance, but now surrounded by the warmth of the home and the laughter of the twins. She felt the stirrings of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel for a long time: hope. Nathaniel cleared his throat, glancing at her with a mixture of nervousness and resolve. "Clara." His voice was low, measured, but it carried a weight that made her attention snap to him immediately. He hesitated, searching for the right words, aware that this moment might change everything between them. "I know you've had a hard journey, more than anyone should have to bear. And I know you've been cautious, guarding yourself, guarding your heart. But I need to tell you something." Clara's heart quickened. She had expected many things from Nathaniel: kindness, protection, friendship, but she hadn't anticipated this depth of vulnerability. "Yes?" she prompted gently, leaning forward, her hands clasped in her lap. Nathaniel took a deep breath, looking past her to the fire as if drawing courage from its steady glow. "I care for you, Clara, more than I ever thought I could care for anyone again, and I understand if you're not ready, or if you can't feel the same. But I couldn't go another day pretending these feelings don't exist." His eyes met hers, clear and honest, and for the first time, Clara saw the full measure of the man, the grief he carried, the strength he wielded, and the heart that still longed to love. Clara's chest tightened, a rush of emotions she had long buried rising to the surface. Fear, Hope, relief, and longing all mingled in her gaze as she searched for the right words. Nathaniel, I've spent so long running, keeping everyone at a distance, myself included. But these past days, with you, with Lily and Rose, I felt something I didn't think I would again. Something safe, something warm. Her voice faltered, yet her eyes were unwavering. I care for you too. I've just been afraid to admit it. Nathaniel's expression softened, a gentle smile curving his lips. He reached across the small space between them, taking her hand in his. You don't have to be afraid here, he whispered. Not with me, not with the girls, not with this town. You're safe. You belong. Tears pricked at the corners of Clara's eyes, but she let them come, unashamed. For so long she had carried the weight of solitude and mistrust. Now she allowed herself to feel hope, love, and the promise of a new beginning. The twins, sensing the moment's importance, tiptoed closer, their wide eyes filled with curiosity and delight. Lily whispered, Papa. She's really nice. Rose nodded vigorously, adding, She makes you smile. Nathaniel laughed softly, squeezing Clara's hand gently. I think they've already decided what I've been too slow to admit, he said, the warmth in his voice echoing the joy in his heart. Clara smiled through her tears, a mixture of relief and happiness. In that quiet room, with the fire crackling and the twins' laughter surrounding them, two souls who had long been cautious and wounded finally acknowledged their feelings. For the first time, Nathaniel and Clara allowed themselves to imagine a life together, a life filled with trust, laughter, and the quiet comfort of belonging. It was a confession. The morning sun spilled over Willow Creek, painting the dusty streets in warm gold, and the small Harper household was alive with quiet anticipation. Lily and Rose had been whispering and giggling for hours, planning something they considered very important, something that would settle a question that had been on their minds since Clara had arrived in their lives. Today, they decided, would be the day they made their declaration. The twins had watched Clara for weeks, observing how she interacted with her father and with them. She had handled their playful pranks with patience, helped them solve little problems, and shared laughter that felt genuine, not forced. She had been there when Nathaniel faced the threat from her past, demonstrating courage and resilience that earned their silent admiration. In the eyes of Lily and Rose, Clara was no longer a stranger, she was someone who belonged. And now, they intended to make it official. They cornered their father in the kitchen as he prepared breakfast, a mischievous gleam in their eyes. Papa, Lily said, tugging at his sleeve, we need to talk. Rose nodded, hopping on a chair to make sure she had his full attention. Nathaniel chuckled, sensing their seriousness despite the sparkle in their eyes. All right, girls, he said, what's going on? Lily leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. It's about Clara, she said, glancing toward the doorway as if Clara might be eavesdropping. We've been watching her, Papa. She's brave and kind, and she loves us. Kind of. Rose rolled her eyes dramatically. Kind of? Papa, she loves us for real. And she loves you too. Nathaniel set down the spatula he was holding, a soft smile tugging at his lips. I know you girls like her, he said gently. But what exactly are you trying to tell me? Lily and Rose exchanged a glance, then, in perfect unison, pointed toward Clara, who had just entered the kitchen carrying a basket of fresh-baked bread from the bakery. Papa, they exclaimed, voices full of certainty and joy, that's her, that's the one. Clara froze for a moment, stunned by the twins' simultaneous proclamation. She looked at Nathaniel, whose expression mirrored a mixture of amusement, surprise, and profound warmth. The twins' words were simple, but their meaning was clear. In their eyes, Clara was no longer an outsider. She was family. Nathaniel felt a rush of emotion, a mix of pride and gratitude. He had known for days that he cared for Clara deeply, but hearing it confirmed through the eyes of his daughters made it feel official, undeniable. He walked toward Clara, taking her hands gently in his. "I think they've made their choice for me," he said softly, his voice filled with quiet joy. Clara's eyes welled with tears, a mix of happiness and relief. For years she had been cautious, hiding from connection and love, yet here were two small girls, with hearts unguarded and honest, welcoming her without hesitation. Their declaration was more powerful than any words Nathaniel or Clara could have exchanged. It was acceptance in its purest form. The twins giggled, sensing the emotional tension they had created, and ran to hug Clara, tugging her into the warmth of their small, confident embrace. Clara laughed softly, wrapping her arms around them. "I think I'm going to like it here," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Nathaniel joined the hug, feeling the first full sense of family he had experienced in years. In that moment, the Harper household was no longer a home of loss and caution. It had become a place of belonging, laughter, and the beginning of a new chapter. The twins' declaration had done more than approve Clara. It had sealed the bond between her and Nathaniel, forging a connection rooted in trust, love, and the unshakable certainty of childhood wisdom. For Clara, it was the final push she needed to allow herself to hope. For Nathaniel, it was the confirmation that the heart could heal and that love could arrive in the most unexpected and beautiful ways. The days in Willow Creek grew warmer as spring began to settle over the town, and the Harper household had changed in ways both small and profound. Laughter now filled every corner of the modest home, from the creaking wooden floors to the kitchen where the smell of freshly baked bread lingered. Nathaniel Harper, once a widowed sheriff whose life had been measured in duty and quiet solitude, now moved through his days with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. By his side was Clara, her presence steady and comforting, and at their feet were Lily and Rose, chattering and giggling as they darted about with boundless energy. The transformation was not sudden, but it was undeniable. Clara had become part of the family, and the family had become her home. The twins' mischievous pranks had evolved into playful games of trust and shared joy. Clara laughed freely now, a sound that mingled with the girls' laughter in a harmony that Nathaniel found himself savoring. In every glance, every gentle touch, there was the sense of belonging they had all longed for, an unspoken promise that this household, once fractured by loss and guarded hearts, was whole again. Nathaniel had watched the changes unfold with quiet gratitude. He marveled at how effortlessly Clara had become part of their lives, not by force or ceremony, but by being herself. Her patience, kindness, and courage had earned the trust of his daughters, and her presence had rekindled his own capacity for love. Each morning, as he watched Clara help the twins prepare for school or laugh with them over breakfast, he felt a profound sense of peace. This was the family he had hoped for, but had feared he would never find again. The twins themselves had become the unofficial ambassadors of this new life. They led Clara through their daily routines, insisting on teaching her their favorite games, introducing her to their friends, and even testing her with pretend emergencies, all of which she handled with patience and grace. "Papa, she's perfect," Lily whispered one morning as they watched Clara help Rose with a tricky drawing. Nathaniel smiled, knowing that the twins' hearts were wise in ways adults often overlooked. They had chosen her, and in doing so, they had helped him make the choice he had been too cautious to admit. Life in Willow Creek continued with its gentle rhythm, but the Harper household now carried a warmth that extended beyond its walls. Clara joined Nathaniel on his rounds, helping him visit townsfolk and mediate small disputes, her insight and calm presence earning the respect of neighbors. Evenings were spent around the fireplace, where stories were shared, plans were made, and the quiet comfort of routine deepened the bonds between them. The house was no longer merely a place of shelter. It was a home filled with love, laughter, and mutual respect. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the horizon with amber and rose, the family gathered on the porch. The twins ran ahead, chasing shadows and giggling with uncontained joy. Clara sat beside Nathaniel, her hand in his, and for a moment they watched the world without speaking. There was no need for words. The connection between them was clear in the easy silence, in the shared smiles, and in the gentle intertwining of hands. Nathaniel leaned closer, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "We found something rare here," he said. "Not just love, but a family. You belong here, Clara. All of us belong together." Clara rested her head against his shoulder, the warmth of the moment filling her with a sense of certainty she had never imagined possible. "I know," she whispered, a tear of happiness sliding down her cheek. "I'm home." In that quiet evening light, with the twins' laughter echoing and the wind carrying the scent of new blossoms across the plains, Willow Creek witnessed a family reborn. Nathaniel, Clara, Lily, and Rose, once individuals shaped by loss and guarded hearts, now stood together, united by love, trust, and the promise of the future. They had faced challenges, danger, and fear, but they had emerged stronger, bound not only by circumstance but by choice. And so, the Harper household became a haven of joy and belonging. The sheriff, the woman who had found courage to stay, and the twins